Giacomo Casanova was born in Venice in 1725, and he died in Bohemia, 1798. He was no doubt one of the most notorious libertines of the 18th century. In his autobiography, The History of My Life, Casanova documented his intimate encounters with over 120 women, from the lowest born to the highest of nobility. Today, we take a look at 3 of those encounters, 3 of the most intriguing loves of Casanova's life. The date was February 25th, 1744, and Casanova, just 18 years old at the time, had stopped for the night in the Italian city of Ancona. The entertainment at Casanova's Inn that night was provided by a family of performers whom he affectionately described as itinerant merchants of art and seduction, gypsies of the soul, and thieves of the heart. These were Casanova's kind of people. As he watched on, Casanova became increasingly enchanted by one of the singers. It was a young castrato of not more than 17 years old, whose eyes, Casanova said, sparkled with a fire that burned his soul. The name of this castrato was Bellino. Since Casanova was not usually attracted to boys, he was at first puzzled at having feelings for a castrato, but he soon convinced himself that this Bellino must in fact be a girl in disguise, and he resolved to find out. Over the course of the next few days, Casanova ingratiated himself to Bellino's family, and he entertained himself in typical Casanovian style by sleeping with Bellino's 2 sisters. His aim, nevertheless, remained the same: to discover Bellino's true identity. At first, Bellino resisted all of Casanova's advances. Bellino did, however, propose a deal. If Casanova would accompany him to Rimini, where the castrato was performing next, then Bellino promised to satisfy Casanova's curiosity. Of course, Casanova agreed to the arrangement, but things did not go quite as smoothly as he had first imagined. The night before their journey began, when the time came for Bellino to fulfill his promise, he refused. He said that despite their agreement, he would not submit to the infamy of being so crudely examined by Casanova. At this point, Casanova completely lost his patience, and a scuffle broke out between the two. But as Bellino attempted to escape the room, Casanova got the shock of his life. On Bellino, in the most sacred of regions, Casanova spotted a monstrous bulge. Had he been wrong all along? The next morning, despite the events of the previous night, Casanova still agreed to travel with Bellino. For every time he looked into the castrato's eyes, his soul could not help but burn with love. After just 15 minutes in the carriage together, Casanova was back on the offensive. He pleaded, he begged, and he raged at Bellino to unambiguously reveal his true identity. But Bellino remained resolute. He simply replied that it mattered not whether he was a girl or a boy, for Casanova was in love with him either way. Later that day, however, there was a dramatic turn of events. When they stopped for the night in Senegalia, they discovered that there was only one bed available at the inn. And to Casanova's surprise, Bellino offered to share it with him. Once in bed, and without hesitation, Bellino moved towards Casanova. For the first time, the two embraced as lovers. And finally, all was revealed. Casanova was vindicated. Bellino was a girl in disguise. And as for the monstrous bulge that Casanova had spotted previously, that had been nothing more than a soft leather decoy used to fool those like Casanova who became too curious. As they lay in bed that night, Casanova and Teresa swore an everlasting love to one another. But it was not to be. As Casanova likes to say, fate will find a way. It wasn't long until circumstances arose that separated the young couple, and it would be another 16 years before they met again. When they did, Casanova discovered that he had, all those years earlier, fathered a son with Teresa, now a young man. And although a lasting bond was never established between them, Casanova later wrote that the day he spent together with Teresa and their son was one of the happiest of his life. The next great love of Casanova's life was the mysterious Henriette. To this day, historians disagree about who Henriette really was. She might even have been a princess of France. In any case, she was perhaps the truest of all of Casanova's loves. The two met in 1749 in the Italian city of Cesena. At the time, Henriette, a French woman, was travelling with a Hungarian officer to the city of Parma, and Casanova, owing exclusively to Henriette's beauty, offered to give them both a ride in his carriage. The next day on the journey, however, Henriette made an unusual request. She told both Casanova and the Hungarian officer that once they arrived in Parma, they should leave her and forget they had ever known her. Casanova, falling increasingly in love with Henriette, could not bear the thought, for the only thing that enslaved him more than her beauty, he wrote, was her wit and intelligence. The next moment he was alone with Henriette, he proclaimed his love for her, but he also gave her an ultimatum. Either she must permit him to stay with her, or tell him to leave now, so that he could avoid the pain of losing her later. Henriette, amused at this request, replied that never in her life had she conceived of a declaration of love being made in anger. But to Casanova's relief, she did agree to stay. Once in Parma, however, Henriette revealed more about her true situation. She confessed that she was being pursued by her family, and that if they found her, they would have no problem in tearing her from Casanova's arms. Casanova trembled at the thought, but Henriette was reassuring. What mattered is that they could love each other now. They should not fear for their future. And so it was for 3 glorious months. They attended the opera, they took rides in the countryside, they lived quietly but happily in the love of one another. On one occasion, to Casanova's surprise, Henriette stood up in front of an entire party and played a flawless solo on the cello. The performance received a thunderous applause, but Casanova could do nothing but go outside and weep tears of joy. He later wrote that they who believe that a woman is incapable of making a man equally happy all the 24 hours of the day have never known a Henriette. Fate, however, will find a way. One afternoon, while attending a public party, Casanova and Henriette were unexpectedly approached by a Monsieur Francois d'Antoine. It turned out that d'Antoine was a relative of Henriette, and after some private meetings together, destiny decreed that she must leave Casanova. Finally, their time was up. They travelled together one last time to Geneva, where they separated, and where, if only to add to her mystery, Henriette arranged for Casanova to receive a considerable amount of gold, 1,500 louis d'or. A few days later, Casanova received the following letter. It is I, my only love, who had to forsake you. Do not add to your grief by thinking of mine. Let us imagine that we have had a pleasant dream, and let us not complain of our destiny, for never was an agreeable dream so long. Let us boast of having succeeded in being happy for 3 months on end. There are few mortals who can say as much. I will have no more lovers in all of my life to come, but I hope that you will not think of doing the same. I wish for you to love again, and even to find another Henriette. Farewell. Casanova never did find another Henriette, but in his old age he wrote that every time he thought of her, it was balm to his soul. Our final story is about a notorious courtesan known as La Charpillon. She almost brought about Casanova's early demise. The year was 1763, and Casanova, now 38 years old, was in London. There he fell in love with La Charpillon. She was around 17 years old and, according to Casanova, was a beauty in whom it was difficult to find a defect. Casanova was warned about La Charpillon many times. His friend Lord Pembroke told him that she was a scheming wench who would do everything and anything she could to trap him. But Casanova could not resist. At first he attempted to win La Charpillon's love with money and expensive gifts, which she was always happy to accept, but for which she gave Casanova nothing in return except rejection and a mischievous smile. One time La Charpillon tricked Casanova into believing that they should live together, for a fee, of course. Casanova accepted the arrangement and paid the fee up front, But one day after moving in with Casanova, Le Charpillon moved out. As Casanova later confessed, he was tasting the poison and gulping it down. Another time, when the two were walking together in Richmond Park, Le Charpillon launched, in Casanova's own words, a full-scale amorous attack. She pushed him to the ground and smothered him with all manner of affection. But again, when Casanova attempted to take things further, she immediately put a stop to the proceedings. This time Casanova was furious. He unsheathed his blade and directed it towards Le Charpillon. To this, she simply responded, "Do whatever you will." Luckily, Casanova came to his senses, and he left the park and Le Charpillon behind. A few days later, Casanova decided he was going to go to Le Charpillon's house and take back everything he had given to her. When he arrived at the house, however, he was met with an unexpected surprise. At 11:45 p.m, when he entered the property, he found Le Charpillon stretched out naked on the sofa with her handsome young male hairdresser. Casanova flew into a rage, and he proceeded to smash everything in the house. In the carnage, the residents emerged trying to calm Casanova, but in the meantime, Le Charpillon had fled, naked and alone, into the streets of London. She was not found until the next day, and Le Charpillon's family took this as an opportunity to fool Casanova one last time. They told him that, because of his actions, Le Charpillon had fallen very sick, and that she had only a few days to live. For Casanova, guilt immediately set in. He could not bear being responsible for the death of Le Charpillon. "I go out," he wrote, firmly intending to drown myself in the Thames at the Tower of London. It was only as he walked, halfway across Westminster Bridge, that he met his salvation. Fate will find a way. There Casanova was spotted by an old acquaintance, a Sir Welbore Agar, who, despite Casanova's resistance, insisted that they should go together for drinks and laughter. And so, after some persuasion, they did. Later that night, after drinking and watching Agar dance naked with a group of girls, Casanova was shocked to his core. He caught sight of Le Charpillon. Far from being on her deathbed, there she was, in a tavern, dancing the night away. Finally, Casanova was completely cured of his ill-advised love for Le Charpillon, and he was ready to move on after one final act. He decided to buy a parrot, and he trained the parrot to say, "Miss Charpillon is more of a whore than her mother," before he had it displayed at the marketplace, to the amusement of the crowd. After all, he reasoned, parrots could not be punished for slander. If you enjoyed this video, you might like to watch this one next, and please remember to subscribe to Immaterial Minds.